Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're just missing Councillor Villeneuve, but she'll be here shortly. This afternoon we have two delegations. Our first delegation is Cliff Stewart, Vice President of Infrastructure, Vancouver Fraser Port Authority. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of Council, for the opportunity to present to you today. My last presentation to you was about a year and a half ago, in May of 2015. I'm here today to give you a general port update, and that's part of a broader program of municipal engagement that is led by Naomi Horsford, and here with me today is Francis Tang-Graham. That program includes meetings with municipal staff, mayors, city managers, and events such as the Union of BC Municipalities. Thanks if you were able to join us in Victoria last Tuesday evening. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the Lower Mainland Local Government Association. Our dedicated team is available to answer any questions you may have about port activities in Surrey at any time. Briefly today, I would like to speak with you about the Port Authority's role, port activities in Surrey, and some project updates. And I'd just like to note that we share a number of goals. Economic development is important, as the Mayor said in her speech earlier this year, the annual address, and the preservation of industrial land is important in Surrey as it is for the Port Authority. Under the Canada Marine Act, the Port Authority is mandated to facilitate trade while protecting the environment and considering local communities. We work for the benefit of all Canadians and are accountable to the Federal Minister of Transportation. Unlike many ports throughout the world, the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority does not receive tax dollars. As a Canadian Port Authority, we're required to provide the marine infrastructure that supports Canada's trade objectives and our nation's role in the global supply chain. To use an analogy, in the same way that YVR doesn't decide immigration policy and hence who gets to come and go through the airport, the Port Authority doesn't decide what Canada trades, but we are there to ensure that it's moved safely and at a reasonable cost to users, and to minimize the impact on communities that host port activities. The Port of Vancouver is a significant local and national economic generator. As Canada's largest port, and in fact the third largest tonnage port in North America, we're responsible for Canada's trade with more than 160 world economies. This enables trade of approximately $184 billion in goods annually, or about 20% of Canada's entire trade in goods by value. It's estimated that there are 100,000 jobs in Canada just in the supply chain alone that depend on the Port of Vancouver. And that generates over $6 billion in wages and nearly $10 billion in GDP across the country. The federal jurisdiction of Canada's largest port includes hundreds of kilometres of shoreline. It borders 16 different municipalities and intersects the asserted and established territories and treaty lands of several Coast Salish First Nations. The red line on this map shows the shoreline that we manage, and the dark blue area shows where we have navigational jurisdiction. We recently updated our vision as well as defined our approach to sustainability. Over 2 years, we worked with partners including municipalities, First Nations, the public, and port users to envision a sustainable gateway, one that delivers economic prosperity through trade, maintains a healthy environment, and enables communities to thrive. And the vision that we developed as a result of that is to be the world's most sustainable port. Now, port activities support thriving communities through economic prosperity and a healthy environment. Port activities in Surrey alone account for $120 million in wages, $190 million in GDP, and over $3 million in municipal taxes. There are 1,800 port jobs that come from businesses that operate on the river and from other port tenants. And port jobs are high paying. They tend to be 50% higher on average than other Canadian salaries. And that doesn't include the nearly 1,700 truck drivers who support the container sector of the port, many of whom live in Surrey, as well as many folks who work on the terminals at Roberts Bank who actually live in Surrey. More than 1 in 4 jobs in Surrey are related to transportation, logistics, and manufacturing. Thriving communities are also key to a sustainable port. And here are a few ways that we are supporting communities. Firstly, through community investment. We contribute 1% of our net revenue back to the community. In Surrey, we sponsored the Party for the Planet, the Surrey Fusion Festival, and the International Children's Festival last year for a total of over $20,000. And we encourage you to get your community groups to apply for our community investment grants. The Fraser River Improvement Initiative is another way that we work to improve the community. This is a 5-year, $10 million project to clean up the river from derelict vessels, structures, and trespass. In fact, we've cleaned up 121 of the 151 sites that have been identified to date, and 12 of these were in Surrey. The most recent Surrey project through the Fraser River Improvement Initiative was the removal of this abandoned BC Hydro pump station in the fall of last year, which marked the 120th project completed under the Fraser River Improvement Initiative. And the next project under the initiative in Surrey will be removal of old piles near Barnston Island later this fall. The Port Authority runs many programs to protect or improve the environment. And these include a few examples. The habitat enhancement projects, where we're out improving fish habitat wherever there are opportunities in the Lower Mainland, both in the Fraser River and in the estuary. The truck licensing system, which seeks to reduce the emissions from trucks serving the port. The non-road diesel emissions program, air emissions inventory, and the Eco Action Program, which in fact first started here in the Port of Vancouver and has now been adopted throughout the world by the United Nations International Maritime Organization. One exciting project I'd like to focus on for a moment is the ECHO program. This program was launched last year in collaboration with academics, environmental organizations, and marine industry to measure the effects of marine traffic on at-risk whales, including the endangered southern resident killer whale. And it focuses on better understanding acoustic disturbance or underwater noise and ways to reduce that. It looks to understand physical disturbance or ship collision and try and eliminate those collisions. It looks at environmental contaminants and finally the availability of prey, all of which are critical for the southern resident killer whale's recovery. There are 2 study areas under the Gateway Transportation Collaboration Forum, the Roberts Bank and Fraser River studies, which look at improving goods movement and reducing the impacts of trade on local communities, which have an impact here in Surrey. This latest map is the result of the Fraser River Trade Area Study and the Roberts Bank Trade Area Studies, both being completed, and it identifies a number of projects here in Surrey. The Plywood Road and Grace Road interchange at Highway 17, the Patello Bridge replacement, the Brownsville Industrial Area improvements, the 168th and 184th Street grade separations, and whistle cessation projects throughout the rail network. The next steps now are to find funding participants. We're awaiting direction from the federal government about funding priorities for nationally significant goods movement infrastructure, and we hope to hear more later this year or early in 2017. I would have liked to have been able to give you a quick update on the Fraser Surrey Docks project. However, the permit for Fraser Surrey Docks is currently under judicial review. As it's before the courts, I really can't comment much further on this at this time. Moving on now, I'd like to talk briefly about the Roberts Bank Terminal 2 project, which many of you are already familiar with. The panel review process has started, and there's an opportunity for community input and consultation. The environmental assessment began in 2013. It entered the panel review phase in May, and the SIA-appointed panel will now lead the process through what is expected to be a 14-month technical review of the project. The 120-day public comment period that started in June has now been extended to the end of October. It focuses on the sufficiency of the environmental impact statement, which will be followed later by public hearings. The timing for these is at the discretion of the panel. In addition, throughout this process, we've been engaging with the 5 local governments south of Fraser, including Surrey, through staff-to-staff technical liaison committees and the local government elected roundtable. The Fraser River is a working river and always has been. We need to preserve industrial land to maintain industrial uses that exist on the Fraser River. Surrey is rapidly growing, and it's essential that newcomers are able to access good-paying local jobs right here. There are over 41,000 jobs that depend on the Fraser River. We need to keep that economic activity for future generations while protecting the environment and responding to the needs of the community. It's clear that we have a good working relationship here. As I mentioned before, we have an eager team of people who are ready to answer your questions and address your needs. And our team and I look forward to continuing to work with you and your staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions from Council? Judy?
Thank you. I'm just wondering if you could tell me what the status is of the expansion of the coal port at the Fraser Docks.
As I mentioned, the permit which the port issued last year is the subject of a judicial review currently. Okay. So until that's through the courts, really not in a position to comment on it.
Okay. Do you have any kind of timeline on how long that may take?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm sorry. Well, thank you very much for your most informative update. I very much appreciate hearing from you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Our second delegation is John Kilhelgate, co-chair of the Surrey Homelessness and Housing Task Force.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your willingness to hear us. It's been a couple of years since we came to speak, so I think many of you know me. I'm John Kilhelgate, and I co-chair Surrey Homelessness and Housing Task Force. I also chair Metro Vancouver and Fraser Valley Council of Community Tables, which represents everyone from here through to Abbotsford. So, Joe, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Joe Woodworth, and I sit on the steering committee of the Surrey Homelessness and Housing Task Force, and I'm here to support and help John Cole today.
It seems like a timely afternoon to be here to talk a little bit about homelessness and housing in the city of Surrey. It's certainly been on every radio show, every TV. It was in your lobby this afternoon. It's something that everybody's talking about. A couple of years ago, we went to speak with Councillor Villeneuve and the members of and Councillor Lefranc, members of the Surrey Homelessness and Housing Society, and we talked about how could the task force collaborate with the City of Surrey and with the society to bring needed housing and resources and services to the city. And one of the things that Councillor Villeneuve said that really stuck in our mind at the time was that with a membership of 40-plus organizations and individuals, we have a lot of collective power, and so we can be the voice for Surrey, speaking to people who can actually help us to get what we need. So we took that to heart and have spent the last year or so really working on connecting with MLAs and MPs and a variety of people in the city of Surrey to talk about what needs there are in Surrey and how we can forward our cause and make sure that our share of money is coming here. So we wanted to talk a little bit about, first of all, what our mission is as a task force. So we're a collaboration of community organizations working together to reduce and prevent homelessness in Surrey. The vision is to have a city where everyone is safely and appropriately housed. And as you all are aware, that takes many forms, from the beginning of the housing continuum, which might be the shelter, all the way through to home ownership. Our strategic pillars include bringing together agencies, organizations, and individuals, and sharing and acting on knowledge and best practices. We're looking at building capacity within the city, within agencies and individuals in the city, creating, as we all love, Surrey-specific solutions, because what works in other parts of the Fraser Valley or Metro Vancouver isn't necessarily what the solutions for Surrey are. And advocating for all of the things that we need, the housing stock, the services, and the resources that are necessary to help people get housed and stay housed. So, Joe, do you want to?
Yep. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about gaps and needs. And this is by no means an exhaustive list. We've had many, many discussions about what the gaps and needs are for the housing continuum in Surrey. But this is a few that we've identified as being really timely and really, really needed. So emergency shelters and transitional housing specifically for youth, and that's youth anywhere. We're seeing youth that are homelessness now at 15, 16 years old, and up to 24, sometimes 30 years old. The youth that used to be considered young adults are now still considered youth, way into their past their teens. And at any given time, I've been in conversation with some of the people at Covenant House, and they say that any given time, 30% of their youth population in Covenant House are from Surrey. And they go to Vancouver because there's just nowhere for them to go in Surrey. Aboriginal families. So if you look at some of the stats in our shelters, 25%, up to 25% of the shelter populations could be Aboriginal, where only 2 to 3% of the population of Surrey is. That's a really odd number. Gender-specific shelters. There's, many circumstances where a gender-neutral shelter isn't safe for somebody, in particular for a woman who is fleeing violence, or a woman in her family who are fleeing violence. They need a gender-specific shelter. There is a huge need for affordable rental housing. Identified approximately 5,500 units. Now, I know some have come and some are on the way, but we're still in need of those. And that includes both people who live in a shelter income or a fixed income because of maybe disabilities, but also the working poor. There are a lot of people who work a good day's work, but can't afford to pay what's market rent these days. There's need for supportive housing for new immigrants and refugees, and as we know, a lot of the Syrian refugees that came in are just about to come off of their federal monies, and they're going to be out looking for housing in the market at market rate. We need money for additional outreach workers and programming spaces. I know you folks all know that as we house more and more people from down on the strip down here, more and more tents pop up every day. And so we really need more outreach workers, more support for them. And then social enterprise to employ disadvantaged persons, and that goes in partnership with having employers work with social services to employ people who can't maybe work a full day but could work part days. So those are just some of the gaps and needs that we've identified today.
Recently, we had the opportunity of meeting with the Liberal MLAs and also with the NDP MLAs, and we were really quite pleased that, first of all, people were really cognizant of the issues that we face in Surrey and of the need to bring more money and more resources. And one of the things that was particularly exciting to all of us was that our MLA, the Liberal caucus members, identified that if we could bring them lists of, or a list of potential sites that could be purchased, they would get the money. And I kind of said, well, we don't have any money. Where's the money going to come from? And they said, your job is to find the list of places. We'll get the money. So we left there feeling pretty good about the fact that that sort of sounded like maybe if we actually gave them addresses, that they would bring some money to the table that was for Surrey. So we did put a list together, and probably I know that people here at the City of Surrey in planning and real estate have been working and putting some lists together too. So there's probably some addresses that cross, but perhaps with input from Mayor and Council, we might get some traction on the fact that we really want them to follow through on that promise that they made to us.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our meeting that we had with Dr. Terry Waterhouse, as Dunkel alluded to. We met actually twice. So he met with some of the steering committee here in the coffee shop over here, just to have a little preliminary discussion about who we are as the task force and what our needs are and what we saw the needs to be. So he agreed he set up a meeting with us and this fabulous team. We spent a half day here brainstorming some of the needs and some of the directions that we could go to try and look at innovative ways of dealing with the homelessness and as it relates to safety aspect. So some of the things that we identified a number of actionable issues, and we're going to follow up on them. Some of them are really, as I said, quite innovative. So we're looking at alternatives to criminalizing behaviors that people do because of homelessness or because of poverty. So the person that goes into Walmart and steals a coat in the middle of January because they're freezing, we think that maybe that could be diverted somewhere else, that they don't have to have a criminal record and spend some time in jail. So we thought of looking at issues like that and how to sort of keep that out of the justice system. Looking at other issues around maybe the task force, doing a little bit of an orientation and training session with bylaws and police around some of the issues that we see, some of the people that we know that are out on the strip that have these kinds of issues that could be dealt with in a different way. So that was really innovative and exciting. We're really, really quite pleased with that meeting. Thank you.
And as you might know, Homelessness Action Week in British Columbia is coming up. It starts on the 9th of October and runs through the 15th. World Homeless Action Day is the 10th. And as always, Surrey has a number of different activities that are going to take place. And Joe, are you going to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so the Homeless Action Week is next week. And the first event starts on Tuesday, October the 11th. And it's the Socks and Sandwiches event. And it happens at the Easy Does It Club on Tuesday around lunchtime. Then the next day is the Wally, or the Surrey Centre, Homeless Action Week event, which happens out of Chuck Bailey, and it's pretty much all day, and it's a very interactive event where we'll have people can get their hair cut and manicures and food and all kinds of really interesting things. Then the following day on the Thursday, the October 13th, we're having the annual Cloverdale barbecue, and so that'll be right at the Centennial Plaza in Cloverdale at lunchtime. And then the following day, on Friday, October 14th, is the March Against Homelessness, which starts out of Source's office in Newton and goes from 11 to 2. And that's all to raise awareness and, in some cases, funds for Homeless Action Week.
And the next activity that seems to come around fairly often, even though it's only once every 3 years, is our Metro Vancouver Homeless Count. This year, for the first time, we're collaborating with our neighbours in the Fraser Valley so that there'll be a count on the same day throughout the region, and we're looking forward to being able to partner with them because a lot of people who are here travel in different directions, so we want to get some information about who's going where and why and what services are people accessing in different communities. Also, where are people from? Are all the people that we see here on the streets actually from Surrey, or are they traveling from other places? The count will take place on March the 8th, and it's a 24-hour point-in-time count. And the other thing that's exciting, although none of us want to see our numbers increase, we've always felt throughout the region that the numbers are an undercount, because on the day of the count, if somebody declines to answer the questionnaire or says, no, I'm not homeless, even though it appears that they are to the person doing the survey, we're not able to count them. So we spent a lot of time over the last 3 years talking about how could we get numbers that were actually representative of what we believe is the issue. Because as you know, if you don't have an issue, nobody wants to give you money to help to solve it. So we want to know how many mums or children do we have that are couch surfing? How many for example, something that came to our attention last year was that there are a number of people, elderly or aging, men in particular, who are living at night in the Gurdwaras and the temples in Surrey. And that was something that we were not necessarily aware of. They don't have housing, and so how do we get services for those folks if we're not aware of that? A couple of the things that are interesting is we're looking at doing a pilot project in Surrey in connection with the count. One will be a rural count, and one will be an urban count that's an extended count. So we'll do the count on the 8th, but then for 2 or 3 days after that, we'll also ask questionnaires in places that people go for meals or services, just to see whether or not people actually were counted or not. And there'll be unique identifiers so that we know that we're not counting people 2 or 3 or 10 times, because that defeats the purpose. And the other thing that was really interesting, listening to the delegation before us about the Port of Vancouver and what they're doing in terms of safety for whales, is that this year, for the very first time, we're also doing a count along the waterways, because it's been identified by staff or port people who are working that there's many people living in dilapidated boats that are venturing into the shipping lanes and risking their own safety as well as the safety of the ships. And so we're doing a little bit of a pilot project in various places along the Fraser River and what have you, to see how many people are actually out there in those sets of circumstances. Last week, the outreach workers at Highland House identified that they've been in contact with a 90-year-old man who's living in an overturned canoe down on the shoreways here in Surrey with a tent or with a tarp over top, and they've offered him support and options and what have you, but he's 90 years old and that's his life, and he just wants to be there. And so all we can do is make sure he has a bit of food, and if he does want any other kinds of services, that we're there to help him. But he's not the only person, so we want to make sure that everybody is taken care of if there's a way to do that.
And then I want to tell you about a couple of upcoming events that we have planned. So we have a decision makers forum where we want to get some of the movers and shakers around the city to come out and do what we're calling measuring up. And so we want to spend a half a day looking again at innovative ways. How can we tackle homelessness and housing in an innovative manner? And we're going to, in conjunction with that, hold a fundraiser and try to raise some money for the Homelessness and Housing Task Force. And I also want to put in a plug for the Surrey Poverty Reduction Coalition through its initiative through the Fostering Change, wrapping community around our youth initiative, has the 19th birthday party event, which there's a little demonstration just outside the door here. It's a fabulous interactive demonstration, and it's part of our 4-year plan. We're in at the end of year 1 now to try and again look at innovative new ways to help our youth. It's estimated this year there'll be between 50 and 60 youth aging out of care in Surrey. Many of them will age right into poverty and homelessness. So we're trying to prevent that. And so go have a look. It's really quite neat.
So thanks for taking time out of your busy day to hear what we're up to, and we'd be delighted to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. Do we have... Go ahead, Councillor
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to really express appreciation to both of you for your long-term passion about this work in the community, and I'm impressed by how many events that you have coming up. That's great. And it sounds very interesting, the new approach to the homeless count. I'm hoping that we do get a sense of who exactly is on our streets. And as you know, homelessness is increasing across all of the Lower Mainland, and so if we can get a sense of who those people are and how they end up on the streets, that would be a really great first step. I want to also support what Joe's saying, and with the 19th birthday party, young people are aging out of care and right onto the streets. And so this project that shows a very touching art piece out in the hallway, out in the atrium, really shows their experience as they lose their supports and actually just age out onto the streets. And so we want to make sure that we know that we can make a difference. There's only between 50 and 60 young people, and we can really make a difference there. I also thank you for your list of events. I want to also mention that on the 13th, we are having our Hero of the Homeless events, and I know that some really interesting people will be getting their capes this year. So I welcome you to come to that as well. I know you'll be there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well.
Thank you. Councillor Villeneuve.
Well, thank you so much, and I'll just reiterate and was going to say similar words as Councillor LaFranc. I'd just like to add that the task force, I know, has been in existence for over 16 years, and so I really appreciate the fact that you've continued that organization, because it's one that has direct touch with organizations on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, and that makes a big difference. And for the time and effort you take to meet with our MLAs and MPs and other people in the community, because it's very good for them to hear from the grassroots. We can often deliver the message, and we often are begging for more assistance, but when they hear it from people that are representing our nonprofits, but also people in the community, I think that really adds to our advocacy efforts, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Hepner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for coming today. It's always interesting, and we're grateful to have a second voice in our advocacy efforts for the vulnerable people in our community. A couple of things. One is I'm so passionate about the aging out and the care for those that are 19, and have been working with SOS Village in providing funding and assistance to their construction efforts for building apartments to take care of those children, at least to a limited number, and anything that we can do to help that, I think, is a real advantage. We're actually looking at taking some of the funds from our Mayor's Charity Ball that's coming up to put towards that, some of those aging out programs. The other is Measuring Up. Measuring Up is an initiative that was started in 2010 by the city for those that are looking for more accessibility in the city in any element, and they're disabled. So I don't know if your Measuring Up is the same as our Measuring Up, but we should make sure that we're clear on what Measuring Up that is, because we also have one going actively in the city of Surrey.
Okay. We will.
Thanks a lot, and thank you for the update on all the events that are coming up. I'll be interested in that count as you do it within the region, and as you broaden how you're going to do that, the assessment in those numbers, that'll be an interesting number for us to have on hand. So thank you for that work.
Thank you. Councillor Fain.
Thank you, and I want to pass along my appreciation, too, for the work that you do and continue to do in our community. I'm pleased to hear that you were having discussions with certainly government MLAs that indicate that there's money available. I love to hear that kind of news, and we too have been hearing those kind of overtures. My question is, are you working with city staff, or you were tasked by the MLAs to go and locate available or potential sites? And certainly our realty division does that continuously, and it's not always an easy task whatsoever. But do you have a plan to go away and do that, or work with the city's realty division in order to identify some of those sites and then report back?
We do. One of the things that we were tasked with by the MLAs was to set up a meeting through the Mayor's office to have people from the City of Surrey and certainly people from Council who are involved in this issue, and to be able to talk about what they believe they can bring to the table and what we would need to do. So we're trying right now at the moment to come up with a date that will work for people, and hopefully they'll give us some checks. That would be lovely.
Thank you.
Councillor Steele.
Thank you very much, and I too want to thank you for all the work you're doing, and to say that at UBCM last week there were quite a number of us lobbying, if you will, or talking very persuasively to our MLAs to say, what are we going to do about this and how do we work together to do it? Because it is a communication and working together that makes the difference. And on that note, the aging out, and I worked in this for a long time years ago, a lot of youth age out with a trust account or some money that's handed to them, and it's handed to them when on their 19th birthday, when they're pushed out of the house and they walk away with a check. And they are at huge risk. Because first of all, they're either beaten up for the check or the money is stolen from them, or they go through it in a month. And we can be talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I don't know whether there's anybody out there, but it's something we should look into to see if there's protection for those youth as well, so that they maybe can get a start on life or deal with it rather than just having that check demolished within 6 months or so. The other aging out, of course, that comes later on is when people turn 65. And if they're on the roster and they're on welfare and they turn 65, that welfare can be cut off immediately because old age pension is supposed to kick in. And if it doesn't and nobody applies for it, that's another reason for it. So we also should be looking out for that area too. I'm sure you're on top of all of it, but we need to look out for it, and we can certainly communicate and get more work out for that as well. And maybe we can help some more of the people that are in very miserable circumstances. So thanks for all you do. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
Councillor Frank.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to also mention to you that we do have a corporate report in public hearing agenda today, R222, that provides an update on activities surrounding homelessness and addictions in the City of Surrey. So it just sort of highlights the work that we have been doing as a city, and I know that staff have been working really diligently to try to find opportunities to make sure that we help the province spend their $500 million. So thank you for that.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your update.